A human lived alone for years until three beautiful alien single moms asked to stay the night. Eric Morgan wiped sweat from his brow as the twin suns of Proxima Centauri b dipped below the horizon. His farmstead, a modest collection of prefabricated structures surrounded by fields of genetically modified wheat, stood as the only human outpost for 100 miles in any direction. The isolation had seemed romantic when he purchased the land 5 years ago, fleeing Earth's overcrowded cities and his own personal demons. Now at 35, that romance had faded like the daylight. He settled into the worn chair on his porch, muscles aching from another day of hard labor. The farm's automated systems handled most of the work, but there was always something breaking down, always something needing his attention. His broad shoulders strained against his faded work shirt as he reached for the bottle of bourbon he'd been saving. "Happy anniversary to me," he muttered, pouring 2 fingers into a chipped glass. 5 years alone. 5 years of talking to machines and the occasional supply ship pilot. 5 years of wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. The night sky of Proxima bloomed with stars, more vibrant and numerous than Earth's had ever been. A streak of light cut across the darkness, a meteor burning up in the atmosphere. Eric raised his glass in a mock toast. "I wish," he paused, feeling foolish. Grown men didn't make wishes on falling stars, but the bourbon had loosened something in him. "I wish I wasn't so damn alone." He drained his glass and was about to pour another when a flash of light, brighter than any meteor, illuminated his farm. Eric jumped to his feet, squinting at what appeared to be a small craft descending rapidly toward the edge of his property. "Holy shit," he breathed, watching as the vessel, sleek and silver, despite obvious damage to one side, made a rough landing in his eastern field. Smoke billowed from its hull. Eric's heart hammered in his chest as he grabbed his pulse rifle from inside the door. Pirates were rare this far out, but not unheard of. He approached cautiously, weapon raised. The ship's hatch opened with a hydraulic hiss, releasing a cloud of acrid smoke. Eric tightened his grip on the rifle. 3 figures emerged, coughing and supporting each other. As they stepped into the moonlight, Eric's breath caught. They were women, at least they appeared female, with skin the color of pale blue twilight that seemed to emit a subtle luminescence. Their hair, flowing to their waists, was pure white like fresh snow. They wore identical gray tunics with high collars and pleated designs that suggested both functionality and elegance. Behind them, 3 smaller figures appeared, children clutching toys and looking terrified. One held a plush animal resembling a fox, another a toy spacecraft that still emitted weak pulses of light, and the third a wooden puzzle box with intricate carvings. The tallest of the women stepped forward, her eyes large, almond-shaped, and a striking violet. Meeting Eric's, despite her obvious exhaustion, she carried herself with dignity. "Please," she said in accented but perfect English. "We need shelter." "Just for tonight." Her voice trembled slightly. "Our ship was damaged in a cosmic storm. We've been adrift for days." Eric lowered his rifle, studying them. They were clearly not pirates. The children huddled behind their mothers, regarding him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Where are you from?" he asked, still cautious. "Ariana," replied the woman. "Or what's left of it. Our world was destroyed in the Hegemony Wars. We are refugees." She gestured to her companions. "I am Letha. These are my sisters, Misa and Karina, and our daughters." Eric's gaze moved from the women to their children, then to the smoking ship. Whatever their story, they were in trouble, and despite his years of self-imposed isolation, he couldn't turn them away. "I'm Eric Morgan," he said, slinging the rifle over his shoulder, "and you're welcome to stay. At least until you can repair your ship." Relief washed over Litha's face. "Thank you. We won't be a burden." As Eric led them toward his home, the smallest child, Karina's daughter, looked up at the night sky and pointed excitedly at another falling star. "Make a wish, Mama," she whispered. Eric glanced back at them, these unexpected visitors who had literally fallen from the sky minutes after his own foolish wish. For the first time in years, he felt something other than resignation stir within him. The farmhouse seemed suddenly less empty as he showed them inside. The children's eyes widened at the sight of his living space, sparse but comfortable, with earth artifacts and books scattered among local crafts. It's not much, Eric said, suddenly self-conscious of the bachelor's state of his home. Misa, the shortest of the sisters with a small scar above her right eyebrow, smiled gently. It's perfect. We've been in that ship for weeks. As Eric busied himself preparing food and arranging sleeping quarters, he caught himself watching the women, their graceful movements, their gentle interactions with their daughters, the way their skins seemed to pulse with a subtle glow when they laughed. It had been so long since he'd heard laughter in his home. Later, with the children asleep and the sisters settled in his spare rooms, Eric sat alone on the porch again. The damaged ship loomed in the darkness of his field, a reminder that these visitors were temporary. Tomorrow he'd help them assess the damage, maybe contact the supply station for parts. For tonight, though, his farm felt different, alive in a way it hadn't been since, well, ever. Eric looked up at the stars, wondering what other wishes they might grant. Morning came with the gentle chime of Eric's alarm, rousing him from the deepest sleep he'd had in years. For a moment, he lay still, wondering if last night's visitors had been a dream, until the smell of something cooking reached him. In his kitchen, he found Litha expertly navigating his modest appliances. Her pale blue skin seemed even more luminescent in the daylight, contrasting with her snow-white hair, now tied back in a practical braid. "Good morning," she said, noticing him in the doorway. "I hope you don't mind. We wanted to repay your hospitality." "Not at all." Eric ran a hand through his sleep-mussed hair, suddenly conscious of his appearance. "Smells amazing." Litha smiled, the expression transforming her already beautiful face. "It's a traditional Arianian breakfast, similar to your Earth pancakes, but with nutrients specifically balanced for optimal morning energy." "Where are the others?" Eric asked, accepting a steaming plate. "Misa is examining our ship with her daughter, Talia. She's our engineer." Litha's expression clouded. "The news isn't good." "Karina is bathing the other children." Eric took a bite and nearly groaned with pleasure. "This is incredible. I'm glad you like it." Litha's violet eyes lingered on him a moment longer than necessary. "On Ariana, I was a botanical scientist. I specialized in creating sustainable food sources." After breakfast, Eric joined Misa at the damaged ship. Up close, the vessel was even more impressive and more severely damaged than he'd realized last night. One entire was scorched black, with panels torn away exposing the complex circuitry. Misa, the shortest of the sisters with a practical demeanor, greeted him with a grimace. "The primary propulsion system is completely fried. The navigation computer is salvageable, but we need replacement parts that—" She hesitated. "That don't exist on this backwater farm," Eric finished for her. "I didn't mean—" "It's okay," he laughed. "I know exactly what this place is. How long to repair?" Misa's shoulders slumped. "Weeks minimum, maybe months." Eric surprised himself with his response. "You're welcome to stay as long as needed." Back at the house, he found Karina in the yard with all three children. The youngest sister had an ethereal quality, her movements graceful as she showed the girls how to tend the small garden Eric had started but neglected. "Mr. Eric," called Nia, Litha's daughter, clutching her plush fox. "Mama says you grow food from dirt. Can you show us?" Something warm unfurled in Eric's chest as he knelt beside the children. "It's a little more complicated than that, but yes. Would you like to help me plant something today?" Their enthusiastic response made him laugh, a sound he barely recognized as his own. The day passed in a blur of activity. Eric showed Litha his greenhouse, impressed by her immediate understanding of his earth crops and her suggestions for improvements. Misa drafted lists of parts they'd need, her technical knowledge far surpassing his own. Karina, he learned, had been a teacher on Ariana, and she had already organized a small classroom area for the girls. By evening, exhausted but oddly content, Eric found himself on the porch again, this time with company. The sisters joined him after putting their daughters to bed, each accepting a glass of bourbon with curious sniffs. "To unexpected guests," Eric toasted. "To unexpected kindness," Litha countered, her glass touching his. Under the stars, they shared stories. The sisters told him of Ariana's destruction by the ruthless Yex hegemony, a militaristic alien empire expanding through their sector. Their escape had been narrow, with countless others lost. My husband was a resistance leader, Letha explained, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. He ensured we escaped before the final bombardment. Similar stories came from Misa and Karina, tales of loss, courage, and the desperate flight to save their children. And you, Karina asked softly, what brought you so far from your people? Eric stared into his glass. Nothing so noble, failed marriage, failed business, needed a fresh start. He shrugged. Turns out isolation isn't the answer I thought it was. Loneliness rarely is, Letha said, her hand briefly touching his arm. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through him. As the night deepened, Eric became increasingly aware of the sisters' subtle glances, the way conversation flowed easily between them. It had been so long since he'd experienced this kind of connection, not just physical attraction, though that was undeniably present, but genuine interest and understanding. When Misa yawned, stretching in a way that highlighted her slender form, Eric realized how late it had become. We should rest, Letha suggested, rising gracefully. Tomorrow we'll be busy. As they said goodnight, Karina surprised him with a light kiss on his cheek. An Arianian gesture of gratitude, she explained, though the lingering look in her eyes suggested something more. Alone again, Eric touched the spot where her lips had been. 5 years of solitude had left him unprepared for the rush of feelings these women stirred in him. It wasn't just their exotic beauty or the way their skin seemed to pulse with inner light. It was their resilience, intelligence, and the unexpected ease he felt in their presence. For the first time since arriving on this distant world, Eric Morgan felt truly alive. A week passed in comfortable routine. Eric found himself rising earlier each morning, eager for the day ahead. The farm that had once felt like exile now buzzed with activity and laughter. The children had taken to following him everywhere, peppering him with questions about Earth, humans, and farming. Today, as he repaired an irrigation line, Nia sat cross-legged beside him, her plush fox tucked under her arm. "Mr. Eric," she began, her luminescent skin glowing brighter with curiosity. "Why do you live all alone? Don't humans have families?" Eric paused, considering how to answer. "Most do. I did once." "What happened to them?" Naya's directness, typical of children, still caught him off guard. "I left them behind." He tightened a connection. "Sometimes adults make mistakes. Like when I spilled nutrient solution on Mama's data pad." Eric chuckled. "Bigger mistakes, but yes." Rhea, Misa's daughter, approached with her toy shuttle. "On Ariane, families stay together forever. Mama says humans are different." "Is that so?" Eric glanced up to see Litha watching from the greenhouse doorway, her expression unreadable. Before he could say more, the farm's proximity alert sounded. Eric stood, shading his eyes against the sun's, as a supply ship appeared on the horizon. "That's odd," he muttered. "They're not due for another 2 weeks." Litha was beside him instantly, tension visible in her slender frame. "Should we hide?" "No need," Eric assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "Probably just a schedule change." The ship, a standard Terran frontier supply vessel, landed smoothly on the designated pad. Eric instructed the children to stay with Karina in the house while he and the other 2 sisters went to greet the visitors. Captain James Reed emerged from the ship, a stocky man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and sharp eyes that missed nothing. His gaze immediately locked on Litha and Misa. "Morgan?" he nodded. "Didn't know you had company." "Recent development," Eric replied casually. "What brings you out early, Reed?" The captain gestured to his co-pilot to begin unloading supplies. "Rerouted schedule. Got some parts you ordered months ago." His eyes narrowed. "And some news you might want to hear, privately." Inside the house, Reed accepted coffee while eyeing the domestic scene with undisguised curiosity. Karina had discreetly taken the children to the back rooms. "So," Reed began once they were alone, "blue-skinned refugees, huh?" "Arianians, if I'm not mistaken." Misa stiffened. "Is that a problem?" Reed held up his hands. "Not for me. But colonial administration has regulations about undocumented aliens, especially with what's happening in nearby systems." What exactly is happening? Eric asked, tension creeping into his voice. Yex scout ships. 3 sightings in the last month. Reed's voice dropped. They're looking for something or someone. Litha's luminescence dimmed noticeably. The hegemony doesn't leave survivors. Which is why I'm telling you this off the record. Reed leaned forward. Register them, Morgan. Get them proper documentation, or otherwise when the Frontier Patrol comes through, and they will, you'll all be in deep shit. After Reed departed with promises of discretion and an expedited parts delivery, Eric found himself alone with the sisters in the kitchen. The weight of Reed's warning hung heavy between them. He's right, Eric finally said. We should register you. And if the Yex track official records, Misa challenged, our people are hunted across the galaxy. Eric ran a hand through his hair. I won't let anything happen to you or the girls. I promise. Karina, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. Why would you risk yourself for us? You barely know us. The question caught Eric off guard. Why indeed? These women had crashed into his life just days ago. Yet the thought of them leaving, or worse, being captured, created a hollow ache in his chest. Because, he began, struggling to articulate feelings he barely understood himself. Because, for the first time in years, this place feels like a home, not just a hiding spot. That evening, after the children were asleep, Eric found Litha on the porch, gazing at the stars. She wore a simple tunic he'd loaned her, the human garment draping differently over her slender form. The children asked why you live alone, she said without preamble. Eric leaned against the railing beside her. I heard, on Ariana, our family structures are different from yours. Her violet eyes reflected starlight. Sisters often share a household, even a partner. Eric's pulse quickened. Is that so? It strengthens family bonds. Litha turned to face him fully. We've observed that humans typically form pair bonds. Typically, Eric agreed, suddenly very aware of her proximity. But humans are adaptable. A smile played at her lips. We've noticed that quality. Her hand brushed his, the contact sending electricity through him. It's one of many things we find fascinating about your species. The air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Eric found himself leaning closer, drawn by the subtle glow of her skin, the exotic scent that reminded him of night-blooming flowers. Litha, he began, his voice rougher than intended. The door opened behind them, and Misa appeared. Rather than interrupting the moment, she joined them, standing close on Eric's other side. We've been discussing human customs, she said, her tone casual, though her eyes were anything but, particularly regarding companionship. Eric glanced between them, reading the invitation in their expressions. I'm beginning to think our species have more in common than differences. Karina completed their circle, emerging from the shadows of the garden. The children wonder if you could be part of our family, she said softly. We've been wondering the same. Under the vast starry sky, Eric found himself surrounded by these extraordinary women who had fallen into his life like a wish granted. Whatever complications tomorrow might bring, Yex scouts, registration issues, repair challenges, tonight offered a different kind of possibility. I'd like that, he said simply, as Litha's hand found his again, this time with deliberate intent. The night deepened around them, full of whispered discoveries and the beginning of connections that transcended the differences between their worlds. The journey to the Colonial Administration outpost took half a day by ground transport. Eric piloted while Litha sat beside him, the other sisters remaining at the farm with the children. The outpost, a collection of prefabricated buildings surrounded by a modest defense perimeter, represented the nearest human settlement to Eric's isolated farm. You're tense, Eric observed as they approached the checkpoint. Litha's luminescence had dimmed to barely a glow. The last time I registered with authorities, my world was destroyed within a week. Eric reached across, taking her hand. The connection between them had deepened rapidly in the days since their evening on the porch. What had begun as attraction had transformed into something more profound after they'd shared not just their bodies, but their histories, fears, and hopes. This is different, he assured her. Humans protect their own. And we're your own now? Her violet eyes searched his face. "You are to me!" The registration process began smoothly enough. Administrator Benson, a no-nonsense woman with steel gray hair, processed their documentation with professional efficiency until she reached Litha's genetic scan. Her eyes widened. "You're a genomic architect." Litha stiffened. "I was a botanical scientist. According to Galactic Intelligence, you're one of only 5 Arianians with level 9 genetic modification credentials." Benson's voice lowered. "The other 4 are confirmed dead." Eric stepped closer to Litha. "What does that mean exactly?" Benson glanced at her security monitors before responding. "It means your friend here knows how to design biological systems that can target specific genetic markers. The Yex hegemony has been hunting Arianian scientists since the war began." "My work was agricultural," Litha insisted. "Crop resilience, not weapons." "The same principles apply." Benson's expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm not your enemy. But you should know. The Yex put a bounty on any surviving Arianian scientists. They're particularly interested in genomic architects." Eric felt cold realization wash over him. "That's why they've been scouting nearby systems." "Likely." Benson finished processing their documentation with deliberate keystrokes. "Your registration is approved, but off record. I've classified it under humanitarian asylum protocols. It won't appear in standard databases." On the journey home, Litha finally spoke. "I should have told you. About being a genetic genius with a bounty on your head?" Despite the gravity of the situation, Eric found himself smiling. "Might have come up sooner." "I didn't want to endanger you." Her skin pulsed with emotion. "My sisters don't even know the full extent of my work. After what happened to our husbands?" Eric pulled the transport to the side of the road, turning to face her fully. "Litha, I need to know everything. Not because I'm afraid, but because I can't protect you if I don't understand what we're facing." Under the alien sky, Litha revealed the truth. Her agricultural research had been a cover for developing biological countermeasures against Yex bioweapons. Her husband, along with Misa's and Karina's, had been part of the resistance leadership. When the Yex discovered how close the Arianians were to creating a defense against their most powerful weapons, they'd accelerated their attack timeline. "The knowledge is still here," she tapped her temple. "If I could reach a properly equipped human lab, I could recreate the countermeasure. It could protect not just what's left of my people, but yours too." When they returned to the farm, they found an unexpected surprise. Captain Reed had delivered the promised parts early. The main components needed to repair the sister ship sat in crates beside the damaged vessel. Misa greeted them with excitement that faded when she saw their expressions. "What's wrong?" That evening, after the children were asleep, the adults gathered in the kitchen. Eric and Litha shared what they'd learned at the outpost, while Misa confirmed the parts would make their ship space-worthy within days. "So we have a choice," Karina said softly. "Flee or fight." "There's another matter we must discuss," Litha added, glancing at her sisters. "If Eric is to truly be part of our family, he should understand our traditions." Misa nodded. "The binding." Eric looked between them. "The what now?" "In our culture," Karina explained, "when sisters share a partner, there's a ritual that formally creates the family bond. It's more than marriage as humans understand it. It's a genetic and spiritual linking." "It would make you part of us," Litha said, "and us part of you, permanently." Eric leaned back in his chair, processing this new information. "And if we did this binding, what would it mean practically?" "You would carry markers of our genetic code," Misa explained. "Your physiology would remain human, but you'd develop certain Arianian traits. Enhanced night vision, perhaps a slight luminescence to your skin. And you would be bound to all 3 of us," Karina added, "equally and completely. Our culture doesn't recognize hierarchies in such relationships." Eric thought of the nights they'd already shared, sometimes with one sister, sometimes with another, as occasionally with all 3. What had begun as physical attraction had evolved into genuine affection and respect. The thought of formalizing those connections felt right, even if the method was alien to him. "What about the children?" he asked. They would become yours in every way that matters, Litha said, including legally, by both our customs and, with proper documentation, human law. Eric stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. The same stars under which he'd made his wish for an end to solitude. The universe had answered in ways he could never have imagined. "When can we do this binding?" he asked, turning back to them. Their luminescence brightened with joy, but Litha tempered it with practicality. "First, we must decide about the ship. If we stay, we become targets here. And if we go, we're vulnerable in space," Misa countered. "There's another option," Eric said slowly, an idea forming. "We repair the ship, but instead of running, we take the fight to them. Get Litha to a human research facility where she can complete her work." "That's insanely dangerous," Karina protested. "So is living in fear," Eric replied. "I've spent 5 years hiding from life. I'm done hiding." The sisters exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Litha spoke for them all. "Tomorrow we begin repairs. The night before we leave, we'll perform the binding." Her violet eyes held Eric's. "If you're certain—" "I've never been more certain of anything," he answered, and was surprised to realize it was true. For 3 days, Eric and Misa worked tirelessly on the ship, while Litha prepared for the binding ritual and Karina kept the children distracted with lessons and games. The atmosphere in the farmhouse vibrated with anticipation and urgency. On the evening of the 3rd day, as Eric and Misa were making final adjustments to the navigation system, the farm's perimeter alert sounded. A familiar supply ship descended toward the landing pad. "Reed's back," Eric muttered, wiping grease from his hands. "Wasn't expecting him for weeks." They met the captain at the edge of the property. Reed emerged from his ship alone, his typically composed demeanor replaced by barely contained agitation. "You need to leave, now." He thrust a data pad into Eric's hands. "Colonial administration's been compromised. Yex infiltrators." Eric scanned the information. Security footage showing Administrator Benson speaking with tall, gray-skinned humanoids whose features seemed to shift and blur. "Shapeshifters." "Close enough. They use biotech to mimic other species." Reed glanced nervously at the sky. "They accessed your registration files 6 hours ago. I came as fast as I could." Misa's luminescence flickered with fear. "How long do we have?" "A day, maybe less." Reed handed Eric a small device. "Military-grade scrambler. Should buy you some time by masking your launch signature. Get to New Terra Station in the Arcturus system. Admiral McKinney is an old friend. He'll protect you." Eric gripped the captain's shoulder. "Why risk yourself for us?" Reed's weathered face softened. 20 years ago, Arianian medics saved my daughter during a plague on Tau Ceti. I never forgot." He turned to go, then paused. "Whatever your girlfriend knows, it must be important if the Yex are this desperate." After Reed departed, the farm erupted into controlled chaos. While Misa finalized the ship repairs, Eric and Karina gathered essential supplies. Litha prepared the children, explaining they would be leaving their temporary home. "But I like it here," protested Nia, clutching her plush fox. "Can't Mr. Eric come with us?" "That's the plan, little one," Litha assured her, exchanging a meaningful glance with Eric over the child's head. As night fell, the ship stood ready. They would launch before dawn, using the scrambler to mask their signature. But first, there was the matter of the binding. The sisters transformed Eric's simple living room into a sacred space. Bioluminescent plants from their ship, salvaged from Ariana, cast the room in ethereal blue light. The air filled with a sweet, unfamiliar scent, as Karina burned small crystals in a ceremonial bowl. "Are you certain?" Litha asked Eric one final time as they stood in the center of the room. "Once done, this cannot be undone." Eric looked at each sister in turn. Litha with her quiet strength, Misa with her practical intelligence, Karina with her nurturing spirit. In the short time they'd been in his life, they'd awakened parts of him he thought long dead. "I've never been more certain," he affirmed. The ritual began with music, a haunting melody Misa produced from a small instrument like a flute. The sisters moved around Eric in a slow dance, their luminescence intensifying until they seemed to glow from within. They removed their tunics, revealing intricate patterns on their blue skin that pulsed with light. Eric followed their lead, standing before them as they circled him, singing in their native language. The air thickened with energy he could almost taste. Litha approached first, pressing her palm to his chest over his heart. "Blood to blood," she whispered. Misa came next, her hand joining her sister's. "Mind to mind?" Karina completed the circle, her touch gentle but firm. Soul to soul. A warmth spread from their hands into Eric's chest, flowing through his body like liquid fire. Not painful, but intense, as though every cell was being rewritten. His vision blurred, then sharpened dramatically. The sisters' luminescence, always beautiful, now appeared as complex patterns of energy he could somehow read like a language. They moved together in perfect synchronicity, the boundaries between them seeming to dissolve. Eric felt their emotions, Litha's determined hope, Misa's analytical curiosity, Karina's boundless compassion, flowing into him as his own feelings flowed into them. When their lips met his, one after another, each kiss deepened the connection. Eric's skin began to tingle, a subtle glow emanating from beneath as the Arianian genetic markers integrated with his human DNA. The culmination of the ritual transcended physical intimacy, becoming a merging of essences that left them all breathless. As they lay entwined afterward, Eric marveled at the changes already manifesting. His enhanced vision, the faint luminescence of his skin, and most strikingly, an awareness of the sister's presence in his mind like a comforting hum. "Is it always like this?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "No," Litha answered, tracing the new patterns appearing on his skin. "The binding is unique to each family. Ours seems particularly compatible." Misa propped herself up on one elbow, her scientific curiosity evident. "Your human physiology accepted our genetic markers more readily than anticipated." "Fascinating." Karina laughed softly. "Always the researcher, sister." She kissed Eric's shoulder where a spiral pattern was forming. "How do you feel?" "Complete," he answered honestly. "Like I found something I didn't know I was missing." Their peaceful moment shattered as the perimeter alarm blared again, this time with the high-pitched tone indicating multiple approaching vessels. "They're early," Eric said, jumping to his feet with newfound agility. Through the window, he could see 3 sleek ships descending toward the farm. Yex scouts. The sisters moved with practiced efficiency, dressing quickly. "The children," Karina said, already heading for the bedrooms. "I'll start the launch sequence," Misa added, racing for the door. Litha grabbed Eric's arm, her violet eyes intense. "The binding gives you access to abilities you don't yet understand. Trust your instincts." As they prepared to flee into the night, Eric felt something new stirring within him, a fierce protectiveness and determination that went beyond his natural human resolve. Whatever these Yex wanted with his new family, they would have to go through him first. And thanks to the binding, he was no longer just a human standing alone. "Get to the ship!" Eric shouted, grabbing the emergency pack he'd prepared. The faint luminescence of his skin, a gift from the binding, cast subtle light as they moved through the darkened house. Karina emerged from the children's room with all 3 girls, still in their night clothes, clutching their treasured toys. "They're coming from the north and east," she reported, her enhanced senses detecting what human eyes couldn't. "The ship's ready," Misa called from the doorway, "but the launch sequence takes 4 minutes." Eric made a quick calculation. Not enough time. "They'll be on us before we clear atmosphere." Outside, the whine of Yex scout ships grew louder as they circled the property, searchlights sweeping across the fields. One ship landed at the perimeter, disgorging gray-skinned figures whose forms seemed to ripple and shift in the darkness. "The rear access tunnel," Eric decided. "We dug it last year as a storm shelter. It comes out behind the ridge, near where your ship landed." They moved swiftly through the house, gathering only essentials. Eric paused at his weapons cabinet, selecting a pulse rifle and 2 sidearms. The weight felt reassuring in his hands, though something told him conventional weapons might have limited effect against the Yex. The tunnel was narrow but navigable, illuminated by the natural glow of the sisters' skin, and now, to a lesser extent, Eric's. The children remained remarkably quiet, sensing the gravity of the situation. "What if they follow us?" Litha whispered as they emerged from the hidden exit. "They will," Eric replied grimly, "but we'll have a head start." The ship loomed ahead, its sleek form barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness. As they approached, Eric felt a strange sensation, a humming awareness of the vessel's systems that hadn't been there before. When Misa pressed her palm to the entry panel, he could somehow sense the security protocols activating, the inner mechanisms responding. Once inside, Misa headed straight for the pilot's console. "I'll initiate the launch sequence." "Let me," Eric said, surprising himself as much as the others. Misa hesitated. "You don't know how to pilot an Arianian vessel." "I think I do." He couldn't explain the certainty, but since the binding knowledge that wasn't his seemed to float just below the surface of his consciousness, Litha nodded in understanding. The binding. It transferred more than just genetic markers. Eric settled into the pilot seat, his hands hovering over the unfamiliar controls. To his amazement, they illuminated at his touch, responding as if they recognized him. Information flooded his mind. Navigation protocols, engine specifications, defensive capabilities. Knowledge embedded in the genetic memory the sisters had shared with him. "This is incredible," he murmured, fingers dancing across the console with growing confidence. Karina secured the children in the rear compartment, while Litha monitored the external sensors. "Yeks approaching from the south. They found the tunnel." "Launching now," Eric announced, but passing several safety protocols that would have extended the countdown. The ship hummed to life, lifting off with surprising grace despite its recent repairs. As they ascended, the farm below erupted in weapons fire. Yeks soldiers emerged from the house just in time to see their quarry escaping. Energy beams lanced upward, several grazing the ship's hull. "Shields at 80%, Misa reported, monitoring the systems beside Eric. "They're scrambling their scout ships." Eric felt rather than saw the pursuing vessels. The binding had linked him not just to the sisters, but somehow to the ship itself, giving him an intuitive understanding of its capabilities. He pushed the engines harder, angling toward the upper atmosphere. "They're faster than us," Litha observed tensely as the distance between them and their pursuers narrowed. But not as maneuverable," Eric countered, a plan forming. "There's an asteroid belt at the edge of this system. If we can reach it—" "Too dangerous," Misa protested. "The navigational systems aren't fully repaired." Eric turned to her, his eyes now faintly luminescent like theirs. "Trust me, I can feel the ship's capabilities. It's like it's part of me now." The sisters exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that now included Eric in its circuit. He could sense their concern, their fear, but also their growing confidence in this new bond. "Do it," Litha decided. Eric pushed the ship to its limits, accelerating toward the distant belt of space debris that circled the system's outer reaches. Behind them, 3 Yeks scout ships followed in tight formation, their weapons periodically firing warning shots. "They want us alive," Karina observed, returning from checking on the children. "Especially Litha." "They won't get any of us," Eric promised, his jaw set with determination. As they approached the asteroid belt, Eric felt his consciousness expanding further, melding with the ship's sensors to perceive the 3-dimensional maze of tumbling rocks ahead. With instincts he never knew he possessed, he threaded the vessel through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow, anticipating the movement of asteroids seconds before they occurred. Behind them, the Yeks ships attempted to follow. One miscalculated, clipping a medium-sized asteroid and spinning out of control. The other 2 continued the pursuit, though more cautiously. "That was amazing," Misa breathed, watching Eric pilot with a skill that surpassed even her own. "It's not just me," Eric replied, his focus unwavering. "It's us. The binding connected me to your knowledge, your instincts." As they emerged from the densest part of the belt, Eric executed a daring maneuver, cutting power momentarily to drift behind a larger asteroid, then reactivating systems to accelerate in an unexpected direction. The pursuing ships overshot their position, momentarily confused. "Reed Scrambler," Eric called out. "Activate it now!" Litha pressed the device Reed had given them. The ship's energy signature immediately dampened, becoming nearly invisible to standard scanners. "We've lost them," Karina confirmed after tense minutes of silence. "For now." Eric set course for the Arcturus system in New Terra Station, where Reed's friend Admiral McKinney awaited. Only then did he release his white-knuckled grip on the controls, exhaling slowly. Litha's hand found his shoulder, her touch sending waves of warmth through their newly formed bond. "You saved us." "We saved us," he corrected, covering her hand with his own. The connection between them pulsed with shared emotion, relief, gratitude, and something deeper that had been growing since that first night when three beautiful alien women had asked to stay. Later, as the ship cruised through hyperspace, Eric found himself alone with Litha in the small command center. The others had retired to rest, the children finally asleep after the excitement of their escape. "I never imagined the binding would connect me to your technology," Eric said, still marveling at his newfound abilities. "The binding is more than a ritual," Litha explained, moving closer. "It's an exchange of essence. You gave us your human strength, your adaptability. We gave you our connection to our world. A fair trade, Annie." Eric smiled, drawing her into his arms. The luminescence of their skin synchronized, pulsing in harmony. "Though I think I got the better deal." As their lips met, Eric felt the presence of Misa and Karina in his mind. Their consciousness joined with his even at a distance. The bond between them all had transcended physical intimacy, becoming something rare and precious, a true joining of different worlds. But as they traveled toward what they hoped would be sanctuary, a shadow lingered at the edges of their newfound happiness. The Yeks would not give up so easily, and the knowledge Litha carried remained both their greatest hope and their greatest danger. New Terra Station loomed before them, a massive orbital complex of interconnected rings and spires that served as humanity's military and scientific headquarters in the Arcturus system. As their ship approached, Eric felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. "They're hailing us," Misa reported from the communications console. Eric opened the channel. "New Terra Station, this is Eric Morgan requesting emergency docking and asylum. We have Captain Reed's authorization code Alpha 7 Delta." A tense moment passed before a gruff voice responded. "Unidentified vessel. Maintain your approach vector. Escort ships are being dispatched." Two sleek human fighters appeared alongside them, guiding their ship toward a secure docking bay. Through the view screen, Eric could see armed personnel assembling. "They don't look welcoming," Karina observed nervously. "Standard protocol," Eric assured her, though he shared her concern. "Reed said Admiral McKinney would help us, but we'll need to get to him first." As they docked, Litha gathered the children. "Remember what we discussed," she told them gently. "Stay close, speak only when spoken to." The station's artificial gravity embraced them as they disembarked. A dozen armed security officers formed a perimeter, their weapons not quite pointed at the family, but ready nonetheless. A stern-faced officer stepped forward. "I'm Commander Miles. You and your companions will be escorted to quarantine for processing." "We need to speak with Admiral McKinney immediately," Eric insisted, standing protectively before the sisters and children. The subtle luminescence of his skin drew curious glances from the security team. "The Admiral is a busy man," Miles began, but was interrupted by a commanding voice from behind the security line. "And yet never too busy for friends of Captain Reed." The security team parted to reveal Admiral Victor McKinney, a tall man with silver-streaked black hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. His sharp eyes took in the scene, lingering on Eric's faintly glowing skin before moving to the Arianian women and children. "Admiral," Eric stepped forward, "James Reed said you could help us." "Indeed," McKinney nodded to Commander Miles. "Stand down. These people are under my protection." Within an hour, they were settled in private quarters within the station's diplomatic section. Admiral McKinney listened intently as they explained their situation. Litha's research, the Yeks pursuit, and the binding that had joined Eric to the Arianian family. "Fascinating," McKinney murmured, examining the patterns on Eric's skin. "I've heard of Arianian binding rituals, but never seen the results firsthand." "Can you help Litha complete her research?" Eric asked. "She needs a proper lab." "Better than that," McKinney smiled. "We've been developing our own countermeasures against Yeks bioweapons. Your arrival couldn't be more timely." The following days passed in a blur of activity. Litha worked alongside human scientists, her expertise complementing their research. Misa assisted the station's engineers, improving their defensive systems with Arianian technology. Karina established a small school for her daughters and other children on the station, bridging human and Arianian educational methods. Eric found himself serving as a liaison between his new family and the human military. his unique position as both human and binding partner to the Arianians giving him unprecedented insight into both perspectives. One evening, as he returned to their quarters after a strategy session with McKinney, he found the sisters waiting for him. Their luminescence pulsed with excitement. "We've done it," Litha announced, her violet eyes bright. "The countermeasure is complete. Human manufacturing techniques solved the stability problems we encountered on Ariana." "That's incredible," Eric embraced her, feeling the joy radiating through their bond. "How soon can it be deployed?" "Production begins tomorrow," Misa explained. "Within weeks, every human and allied ship will carry the defense." Their celebration was interrupted by an urgent communication from Admiral McKinney. "Morgan, get your family to the central hub immediately. We've detected an Yex battle group entering the system." The station erupted into organized chaos as they made their way to the command center. Through view screens, they watched as a dozen Yex warships emerged from hyperspace, their angular forms bristling with weapons. "They must have tracked us somehow," Karina whispered, clutching her daughter close. Admiral McKinney stood calmly at the center of the storm, issuing orders with practiced efficiency. "Deploy the fleet. Activate all defensive systems." He turned to Eric and the sisters. "This is earlier than we'd hoped, but perhaps it's for the best. We can test your countermeasure in actual combat." "It's not ready for wide deployment," Litha protested. "We've only produced enough for a few ships." "Then we'll make it count," McKinney replied grimly. "Morgan, I need you on our flagship. Your connection to Arianian systems might give us an edge." Eric looked to his family, torn between duty and protection. Through their bond, he felt their response: pride, fear, and resolute support. "We'll be safe here," Litha assured him, though her concern rippled through their connection. "Do what you must." The goodbye was brief but intense, each sister embracing him in turn, their touch conveying what words couldn't. The children clung to his legs, extracting promises of return. Aboard the human flagship Intrepid, Eric found himself in a unique position. His binding-enhanced abilities allowed him to interface with both human and salvaged Arianian systems, creating a hybrid defense network more effective than either alone. As the battle joined, the Yex initially held the advantage, their superior numbers pressing the human fleet back toward the station. But when they deployed their dreaded bioweapon, a cloud of nanites designed to disrupt organic systems, the tide turned. The lead human ships, protected by Litha's countermeasure, sailed unharmed through the deadly cloud. The Yex commanders, clearly shocked by this development, hesitated just long enough for Admiral McKinney to spring his trap. Hidden human reinforcements emerged from behind New Terra's moon, catching the Yex in a devastating crossfire. Through it all, Eric maintained the integrated defense systems, his consciousness expanded by the binding to encompass the entire battlefield. He felt rather than saw the moment when the Yex flagship attempted to target the station directly, a desperate move to eliminate Litha and her research. Without conscious thought, Eric redirected all available power to the station's shields, his mind merging with the defense grid in ways no pure human could achieve. The Yex weapons fire splashed harmlessly against the reinforced barrier. The battle ended not with the destruction of the Yex fleet, but with their retreat, a humiliating first for the supposedly invincible hegemony. When Eric returned to the station, exhausted but triumphant, he found his family waiting. The sisters' luminescence brightened at his approach, their joy flowing through their shared bond. The children launched themselves at him, chattering excitedly about watching the battle from the station's observation deck. Admiral McKinney approached, his expression solemn but satisfied. "The Yex won't give up entirely, but this defeat will force them to reconsider their strategy. You've given us time to distribute the countermeasure throughout human space." He smiled at the family. "And I've received authorization to offer you all permanent resident status. There's a research outpost on Arcturus 4 that could use a team of your unique talents." Later, alone with his three partners, Eric marveled at how completely his life had transformed. From isolated farmer to defender of two species, from lonely exile to the center of a loving family. "Do you ever regret it?" Karina asked softly, her head resting on his shoulder as they watched the children sleep. "Taking in 3 strangers that night?" "Never," Eric replied honestly, drawing her closer. Misa and Litha joined them, their bodies fitting perfectly against his as if designed by the universe for this very configuration. "Best wish I ever made." Litha smiled, tracing the now permanent luminescent patterns on his skin. "On Ariana, we had a saying, 'Stars grant wishes to those with open hearts.' Well, my heart is definitely full now," Eric murmured, embracing the three women who had fallen from the sky and changed everything. Outside the viewport, the stars of Arcturus glittered like possibilities. Their future would hold challenges. The Yeks would return, cultural differences would require navigation, and raising three half-Arianian daughters would undoubtedly bring surprises. But for a man who had once wished only for an end to solitude, Eric Morgan had received far more than he'd ever dreamed possible. He had found not just companionship, but purpose. Not just pleasure, but love. Not just a family, but a bridge between worlds. And it had all begun with a single night.